The explosion shook the quiet cul-de-sac of Oak Haven like a thunderclap. I mean, windows rattled, car alarms blared, and smoke, thick, angry black smoke, just billowed out of Eleanor Vance's perfect white chimney. Everyone rushed outside, still half asleep, and there she stood in her immaculate driveway, screaming, her blonde helmet hair half singed, shouting something totally unhinged about defective kiln-dried lumber. But I knew better. Oh, I knew exactly what had happened. You see, for months, this woman had been slowly, methodically poisoning the peace of our small, suburban enclave. Oak Haven isn't huge. It's one of those cookie-cutter HOA nightmares. All manicured boxwoods and forced smiles, where the biggest drama is usually which neighbor's solar panels are too visible. I, a newly retired civil engineer, had moved here looking for simplicity after my wife passed, a place where the rules would keep things simple. I was wrong, so wrong. Eleanor Vance, mid-50s, sharp suits, and an ego the size of Texas, had swept into the HOA presidency with zero warning. Nobody even remembered the vote, but suddenly she had the clipboard, the whistle, and the power of a petty deity. She loved three things: control, attention, and flexing that perceived authority. She'd walk around with her phone, snapping high-res photos of people's mail slot alignment, measuring rose bush height, and sending out fines like she was issuing death warrants. My first offense? My modest, neatly stacked woodpile. I loved splitting logs. It's honest work, unlike an HOA meeting. She showed up one Tuesday, plastic smile glued to her face, holding a violation notice. "Mr. Peterson," she cooed, "your firewood, while rustic, violates Section 3B of the covenants. It's visible from the street, and it disrupts the neighborhood symmetry." I blinked, genuinely confused. "Symmetry, Eleanor? It's behind the shed." She just tilted her head, perfectly poised. "From certain angles, Tom, it constitutes an aesthetic hazard. Relocate it or pay the fine." I didn't move it. I just stacked it tighter, neater, behind the privacy fence that should have been the end of it. But Eleanor doesn't stop when she's ignored. She escalates. A week later, I noticed something was off. My pile was smaller. At first, I blamed my aging memory, but 2 days later, even more logs were gone, and then again, another dozen. It wasn't the cost. I could afford the wood. It was the absolute nerve of someone trespassing, of someone treating my private property like a free, all-you-can-carry lumberyard. I asked around. My sweet neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, shrugged and suggested wintertime mischief, but no kid was hauling 50 pounds of seasoned oak through the dark. This was personal, and I decided to find out who my unwelcome customer was. I'm an engineer, right? We don't guess, we measure and verify. I marked 24 logs with tiny, almost invisible Scrivener's scratches, a craftsman's trick, and installed a cheap motion sensor light near the gate. That night, around midnight, the light flashed on. I peered through the blinds, catching a fleeting silhouette slipping out the back gate, something shiny catching the pale moonlight, gone too fast to confirm. The next morning, 6 marked logs were gone, and the wet lawn near the fence was flattened by something unmistakable: high heels. There was only one woman in Oak Haven who wore 6-inch stilettos to take out the trash, let alone steal heavy oak logs at midnight. But the final straw, the moment that shifted my entire perspective, came the next afternoon. I received another, much stiffer, violation notice from the HOA, signed, of course, by President Eleanor Vance, citing me for excessive fire hazard and unsecure materials. The absolute audacity. So I drove by her house later that day, and there it was, sitting through her massive bay window, stacked neatly by her gilded fireplace. My firewood, the exact scratches visible on the ends of the logs. She was burning my wood while simultaneously fining me for its unsightly storage. I could have marched over, slammed her door, shown her the video, and demanded she stop. But that would have fed her hunger for drama. That would have given her the fight she craved. No, I thought, leaning against my truck, a slow, wicked grin spreading across my face. Confrontation is for amateurs. Retribution requires engineering. I whispered to myself, "All right, Eleanor, you want my firewood? You can have it, and it's going to be a housewarming gift you'll never forget. I spent the next few days in my garage, transforming from a retired engineer into an architect of poetic justice. I wasn't planning anything dangerous. I had no interest in arson or assault. I just wanted an educational moment. I wanted consequences to literally and metaphorically blow up in her face. I pulled out the old lathe and a few leftover pieces of scrap lumber. The plan was simple, elegant, and entirely Tom Peterson. I would create a few decoys, hollow, lightweight, but visually perfect. I drilled out the core, plugged the ends with bark and wood putty, making them look solid and heavy. The secret ingredient? A measured charge of pyrotechnic-grade black powder. The kind you use for 4th of July fireworks. Just enough for a massive, dramatic pop and a cloud of smoke when ignited, but absolutely non-destructive to the structure. I call the project half. I went about my routine the next day. Coffee, emails, pretending to read the latest self-important HOA bulletin. Around noon, I took a walk, and sure enough, as I passed Eleanor's perfect little house, there was the newly acquired wood stacked proudly in her steel rack. I nodded to her in the driveway. "Morning, Eleanor. Lovely weather." She replied with that clipped, overly sweet HOA tone. "Good afternoon, Tom. I'm having a delightful fire tonight. Nothing like the warmth of natural wood, is there?" I smiled. "I bet. Just be careful with that stuff, Eleanor. Sometimes you think you're getting something free, but it comes with surprises." Her smile vanished, but she said nothing. That night, around 8:45 p.m., I was watching a documentary, fittingly about structural failures, when a dull thump echoed across the street. I waited 10 seconds. Then came the K-boom, louder, followed by the faint, unmistakable sound of a woman screaming, "Oh my God." I walked out to my porch, putting on my most neutral, concerned expression. The sight was cinematic. Gray smoke spewing from Eleanor's chimney like a factory stack, the delicate wreath on her front door half singed, and Eleanor herself standing in the middle of her yard, hair frizzed, face blackened with soot, shouting hysterically at a young firefighter. It just exploded. I was burning a few logs, and then, boom, she shrieked, waving her arms. The firefighter, bless his heart, was trying desperately not to laugh. "Ma'am, it looks like you had some kind of rapid combustion. Did you buy defective wood?" Eleanor stammered. I didn't buy it. I sourced it locally." Everyone in the rapidly gathering crowd turned their heads towards me, the man who sources wood. I raised an eyebrow, staying perfectly calm. "Sourced, Eleanor? That's one way to put it." The humiliation was immediate, visceral. She glared at me, realizing what she'd revealed, but I just smiled and whispered, "Funny, because I have the footage that says otherwise." The next morning was the real show. A fire inspection truck, 2 HOA board members looking utterly miserable, and Eleanor in a hat and massive sunglasses, trying to hide a face still faintly dusted with soot. I strolled over with my coffee. "Rough night, Karen, Eleanor." She snapped. "This isn't funny, Tom. You planted explosives. You tried to kill me." I took a slow sip. "That's a bold accusation, Eleanor. Especially since you've admitted on record that the wood came from me." And as the fire inspector confirmed, it was just common pyrotechnic material, hardly a military-grade device. More like a very loud, very smoky warning shot. I pulled out my phone. "Remember the cameras you fined me for? They were very handy. Want to see the footage of you dragging the evidence off my property at midnight?" The moment was perfect. Her mouth opened, closed, then open again, gasping for a shred of logic. The HOA treasurer, a meek woman named Martha, leaned over to the VP. "She doesn't run this neighborhood anymore," she whispered. Eleanor heard it. The climax came that evening at the special HOA hearing she'd called to officially fine me for endangerment. She ran it about sabotage and malice. When it was my turn, I didn't defend myself. I just pulled out my folder, the fire inspector's report, proving the explosion happened in her fireplace, and the video projected onto the clubhouse wall, showing her in full, high-definition black and white glory, stealing the wood. The VP, a level-headed attorney named Wilson, finally had enough. "According to the bylaws," he announced, "the board can call an emergency vote if a sitting president acts against community interest." He called the vote. One by one, hands went up, first hesitantly, then decisively. Martha's hand shot up faster than anyone's. Eleanor looked around, her face frozen in disbelief. "You're firing me? After everything I've done?" Wilson simply nodded. Motion carried. She didn't stay to hear the applause. She grabbed her purse, muttered something about lawyers, and stormed out, her final, dramatic exit. But this time, no one followed. The peace that followed was glorious. No more fines, no more policing. Oakhaven Estates started to breathe again. Eleanor tried to sue me personally. She plastered her yard with protest signs, but her power was gone. A few months later, I woke up to a for sale sign in her yard. The day the moving truck arrived, half the neighborhood came out for a silent celebration. As she drove off, she stopped in front of my house, rolled down her window, and shouted, "You haven't seen the last of me, Tom." I raised my coffee cup and smiled. "If I do, Eleanor, I'll be sure to install another camera." I sit by my fire pit now, a real fire pit, surrounded by neighbors. Martha brings the cookies, Wilson brings the beer. We laugh about the great firewood incident like it's a local legend. And I realized something crucial. Revenge wasn't the point. It was about balance. It was about showing a tyrant that when you confuse control with leadership, when you violate the most basic, neighborly trust, like stealing a man's firewood, justice has a way of showing up. And sometimes, just sometimes, it shows up loud, messy, and perfectly engineered.